Hey guys. So if it isn't obvious, I'm exhausted. I got a very late start today. Um, I should have been in bed about 30 minutes ago. But I wanted to see at least one thing before I did. I have been working on the next 5-ish minute lore, and then immediately after that I have another project to jump into. But I was only able to edit for about 45 minutes a day, and then I looked down at the clock and realized I was 30 minutes late for going to bed. But Alfaris has decided to torture me yet again with the history of girls on Panzer der Film. Now, I watched part 1 and 2 of this by Potential History. This was also made by Potential History. And, really, I can't wait to see what this is going to be. I already know it's going to be entertaining. I already know that Japanese schoolgirls are absolutely inhuman when it comes to their skill sets. So, let's just jump into it. If I seem like I'm rambling, I probably am. I'm very tired. But, yeah, let's go.
It's coming right at us!
Yay!
Yay.
Luna! Clara! You can't speak Russian on the battlefield!
Remember, no Russian.
No.
We can finish them if we charge now! Yes, charging in is what we do! That's right, because it always works. Mako, start going as if you're trying to run away but can't quite make it.
What does that even mean?
Some of you may remember that the history behind Girls in Panzer was one of the first real series I did here, if you could even call it that, and in celebration of 100,000 subs, / reaching the Patreon goal, / all of the comments, I have decided to finally do the history behind their film. But beforehand, I will reiterate my disclaimer from the original videos to the skeptics. I am really not an anime
That's a
fan.
creepy
In
look.
fact, this is the only series I have ever watched. And I will say that, objectively, the premise is very stupid. But I keep coming back to it because there are layers and layers of good historical references made in it, and you can tell the people who made it really cared. Even certain tank gods. And also, even with how stupid some of the physics are, it's just really fun to watch. And before you watch this one, if you haven't yet, I recommend you watch my historical analysis on the series first, because there's a lot of references and tanks explained there that I'm not going to mention here because I've already done them. I'll be focusing on elements that are more new to the movie. Also, a fair bit of the movie itself is just plot, which I'll probably just mostly skip over because it's not historical, and to be honest, the plot is kind of garbage. Also, I managed to find a dub of the movie for the clips, which I'm sure you'll all be very happy about.
Yay.
The film opens with the British team, St. Gloriana's, taking cover in a sand trap on a golf course surrounded by Ori in a post-tournament exhibition match of combined high school teams as the Finns watch from afar. More on them later. A referee Yokosuka P1Y plane is seen overhead watching the match. It is then that we meet a new team, Chiatan Academy, or the Japanese.
Okay.
This team sports mostly early variant Type 97 Chiha tanks. The Type 97 was designed in 1936 as an improvement on the Type 95 Light, and saw many of the same features such as the bell crank suspension used on it. It was the second most produced tank by the Imperial Japanese Army of World War II, and saw service on all fronts till the end of the war. There are also a few Type 95 Ha-Go tanks, which was the Japanese interpretation of the 7-ton Light seen popping up in many countries in the early 30s. During the war, especially up against the US and Red armies, these tanks fared very poorly against newer, heavier vehicles, as these were meant to be infantry tanks to support the infantry, and the Japanese didn't really care too much about heavy.
Of course, there is someone in a schoolgirl outfit standing on the tank.
Armor or large guns on them, as Japan's main focus during their development was on China, a country with no significant tank force. For more information on this, and the Ha-Go in particular, check out the video I did on the inside of the Ha-Go tank. Niho orders the Ori and Chihitan force to advance, which, after a bit, the Japanese interpret as an order for an all-out charge Banzai style.
Really?
And it's fun to see the Japanese have a sense of humor about themselves and continue the running gag of school cultural stereotypes. 2 Matilda IIs are taken out along with most of the Japanese team, and the British are able to escape once their allies, the Russians, come and relieve them.
Really?
Coming from the other side are a handful of Mark VI Crusader tanks led by fan favorite Rosehip. The Crusader was an early to mid-war cavalry tank, boasting ridiculous speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, making them excellently suited for the deserts in the North African campaign. However, these tanks were plagued with mechanical problems, which became their Achilles heel. By the time these issues were sorted out, though, the tank was outclassed. The show, though, really plays to their speed with some ridiculous maneuvers pulled off by it. Ori quickly finds itself surrounded and falls back to the city as the Finns judge them. There is then a long chase with multiple British and Russian tanks being lost, along with a few from Ori. The funniest one being the M3 Lee being killed by Nona's IS-2. Damn, Nona's
Nobody
a
got
cold
hurt.
bitch. And I guess I'll address this now. All the tanks are once again moving way too fast. You have infantry tanks speeding along with cavalry tanks at certain points. I know I mentioned this in my videos on the series, but the movie cranks the speed factor up to 10. The girl in the Ha-Go hits her head on a World of Tanks reference when venturing into a no-fire zone, and there's a reference to Episode 3 with the Matilda on the lift. The KV-2 makes a short appearance before falling over and destroying itself, right next to a D-Day reference, and the battle ends with Ori defeated when the Panzer IV flag tank is taken out after a bit more chase, and the Finns continue to judge from afar.
Nice.
Then there's a fan service scene, because anime, where the characters discuss the coming semester. At the end, though, the president is called away and we are presented with the rising action of the story, which is basically this guy, Tankery Hitler, going back on his promise to keep Ori open if they won the high school tankery tournament in the series. So now the school's getting shut down again. Also, it's weird to see a guy in this series. I thought they just had some kind of female mitosis thing going on in this universe. On a side note, I can kind of see why the next series is the final one, because the writers of this series only do one story. Their series and film are the exact same story with a couple details changed around, and the finale is pretty close to the same thing too. I'm still gonna watch it all, though. All the crews go to tell their tanks goodbye as the Ministry of Education is set to take them all. But right in time, the Americans swoop in a Lockheed C-5M Super Galaxy transport plane and secure the tanks as if they were oil or something. They take Ori's tanks to keep them out of the Ministry of Education's hands in an operation dubbed I Shall Return, which is the quote from Douglas MacArthur upon his being forced out of the Philippines by the Japanese in 1941. The next day, everyone leaves the ship and it sails away to be decommissioned. Everyone is loaded onto buses and they are taken to a holding area.
Really?
That night, Saunders returns with Ori's tanks, airdropping them down in Operation I Have Returned, the words of Douglas MacArthur when he retook the Philippines in 1944. The next bit is a lot of plot, but there are some good references hidden inside, including Yukari cooking with German mess equipment next to a Zelt, and the History Club playing a military strategy game that looks like it's about the North African campaign. Miho and the gang head into town in the Panzer IV and stop to visit Nightmare Land. And that and this person become important later. Also, Yukari is my spirit animal.
For a guy named Punchy, he sure gets punched a lot.
Back in reality, the president attempts negotiations with Tankery Hitler, and over a few scenes with some help from other characters, is able to convince the Federation to let Ori fight against a college team to keep their school. As this is going on, Miho goes home, where you find out her and Maho are actually friends, and that her mother still holds a grudge against her for saving someone instead of winning a sport. There's then a flashback scene with a Panzer II.
That is literally emotional damage.
An early war German tank that saw service on all fronts with multiple
Where's my Puma?
variants produced, and was seen as the workhorse of the German army from 1939 through 40. Miho's mother meets with the mother of the leader of the university team they will be fighting, set to clips of University Shermans driving through a field of destroyed Panthers from another school as they discuss the match. The president returns to camp and tells everyone about the match, to much joy from the others, but worries about how few tanks they have, and that it's an annihilation match. Ori seems to have an out, though, as the other teams are seen traveling, with the British school on their ship, the Americans flying their C-5, the Russians traveling on a Zubar-class LCAC, a large fan-driven landing craft from the late 80s, the Germans in an LZ-217 Graf Zeppelin, the Japanese on a train, and the Finns in the forest. Because of course they are.
Yes.
Venice.
All sending and receiving communications about a tea party they're...
All they need now is a couple of guys on skis under heavy doses of methamphetamines.
Invited to attend. At the qualification, the other schools provide additional troops and tanks, including a Tiger 1 and 2 and 2 Panthers from the Germans, various Shermans from the Americans, 2 T-34-85s, an IS-2 and a KV-2 from the Russians, a Churchill, Matilda II, and Crusader from the British, a CV-33 from the Italians, a BT-42 from the Finns, and multiple Type 97 and Type 95 from the Japanese. The leaders from each team meet in a tent to discuss strategy, and Mini Stalin makes a Cold War reference, with Maho shooting her down. Each commander also makes a joke about what their attack plan would be according to the stereotype of their country's army. After this, we formally meet the enemy, the All-Stars University team, who are essentially
Really?
a post-war UN team consisting of mostly M26 Pershings. The Pershing was the Americans' answer to the heavy tanks popping up in late World War II from the Germans and the Soviets, and didn't see much service in World War II, but did in
No.
Korea. The design supported an excellent 90mm gun and good armor, but it suffered from reliability problems for most of its life. They also have a few M24 Chaffee light tanks. Built as a replacement for the Stuart, the Chaffee also saw limited service in World War II, as they could not be fielded in significant numbers in time, but saw service in Korea and are currently in service still in Uruguay. The command tank is a Centurion Mark I, a British post-war tank considered by many to be the first MBT. Although it missed World War II,
Okay.
Centurions were in service until the late 80s, seeing its heaviest service also in Korea. It was also, in my opinion, the only good British design during World War II, and it didn't even make World War II. Proceed to fight in the comments over that statement. The match begins with both teams moving forward, scouting for each other. Now this battle is nearly an hour long, and a total clusterfuck of stuff going on. So instead of going through it blow by blow, because that would be boring, I'll briefly mention the bigger things and focus more on the references.
Okay.
But if you haven't, you definitely should watch it. Regardless of how inaccurate it is, it's just super fun to watch. The first action takes place in the woods, as the university team attempts to encircle Ori, and it goes very well for them.
Reporting damage to both the left and right tracks. Artillery's broken. Situational.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
The center of Ori's force makes it to the top of a hill, where this happens, much to everyone's confusion. Yukuri thinks it's a Sturmtiger, and the tanks are sent out to investigate. The hill force
Yeah, nobody gets hurt in these.
retreats, and in their chase, Clara and Nona go to the Great Gulag in the sky.
Miss Katusha, it's been an honor to fight alongside you.
No, Clara! Stop.
Wait, nobody dies in this sport. Why is
Yeah.
Stalin so upset? The scout tanks soon find out that the large explosions
Okay.
were caused by a large Karl Garat mortar, a German 600mm siege mortar mounted on a mobile chassis.
Yes.
Although impressive, these weapons were very impractical during the war and saw limited service. They required large crews to man and defend and were extremely difficult to get from place to place, and they were mostly a large morale booster for German troops in the field. The scout tanks hatch a plan to kill it, with the BT-42 providing support. The BT-42 was a Finnish modification of Soviet BT-7 light tanks, adding a bigger turret and gun, and made in limited numbers. Now, as ridiculous and awesome as the BT scene is, it is made with the history of the vehicle in mind, namely in two parts. The first being the large jump it made. The world record for longest jump made by a tank was made by a Soviet BT. So this is
Really?
probably a reference to that. But with the BT-42 being heavier, I doubt it could make this, but that is what it's referring to. The second is it driving on its road wheels. The BT tanks did have this feature to shift the drive to its wheels when the
Really?
tracks were taken off. But this was a bit of a
Nice.
process and didn't happen this quickly. After taking out a few Pershings that it probably couldn't, the BT is killed and the Hetzer makes a jump it could not make to kill the Karl. The battle then heads
Wow.
into a military-themed amusement park, and there are a ton of references within, including a Thomas the Tank version of a tortoise, a rat, a V2 rocket, and a little fortified house called the Maginot House, in reference to the Maginot Line, just to
Really?
name a few. The university team arrives and a lot of fighting ensues, most notably with the T-28 Super Heavy tank. This 100-ton American assault gun was developed late in the war to deal with the Siegfried Line on the German border. The idea was it would punch through the
Jesus.
German defenses, and the Germans would be unable to kill it in the process. However, the Siegfried Line had already been overrun by the time it passed its trials, and it was never used. The Japanese team are seen hiding and waiting for the enemy to pass them before they attack, in reference to Japanese late war strategy in the Pacific of letting American troops land and move inland a bit before opening fire to maximize casualties. The university team manages to herd Ori into one spot and anime ensues. Then there's a lot of
Anime
street
ensues.
fighting where the teams are whittled down, mostly by Alice going ham.
Ooh.
To the Tiger 1 and Panzer 4 against the Centurion. There's a ridiculous chase scene that's basically Tokyo Drift, where Alice hesitates because she sees a bear, and Miho is able to claim victory. The Tiger tows the Panzer 4 back, and everyone celebrates.
Yay.
Well, there it is, and I hope this video at least somewhat lived up to your expectations of the months of requests. It probably didn't. But I just want to take a second at the end here to thank everybody for 100,000 subscribers and all of the support. And hopefully this long requested video shows at least a part of all the gratitude I have for it. When I started this channel, I figured I would probably just make videos for a few people for fun, and never would have imagined it would so quickly turn into the awesome community it is now. As always, I'd also like to thank my patrons on Patreon for making my videos possible. But this one especially because this was one of my goals, and I couldn't have reached it without them as fast as I did. Now, here's some more shitposts to play out the video.
Yay!
Yay.
Help me, please!
Kick his ass, Seabass!
Nope.
Nice.
Mission failed. We'll go next time.
Ferris wheel.
Autism!
We're surrounded, Geronimo! What should we do, Geronimo? My name is not Geronimo! Get between the buildings and don't worry about destroying them! It's like a movie
Really?
set! Roger! Geronimo! They must be planning a deep operation.
Oh my god. Okay, so that was the history of girls on Panzer der Film. And I know in the comments section there's going to be at least 10 to 15 people telling me I should watch the show. I will if I can. I will if I ever have the time. But until then, yeah. This was once again enjoyable. God, I actually like anime. I really do. I just never have any time to actually sit down and watch. I should just sit down and dedicate like 20 or 30 minutes a day to watching. But even today, it's like I'm not gonna get a lot of sleep because I'm up. I'm an idiot. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. There's a Discord down below for you guys to jump into and give me more things to watch when I should be sleeping. And if you'd like to support the channel, I have a Patreon down below. Hopefully by this weekend, well, hopefully in the next couple of days, I'll have the next episode of 5-ish Minute Lore done. And then I have another episode of the Commissar story, and then I have something else. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.